Hello, everyone. Another momentous day in the life of our great country. It's momentous because never before has an American former or current president been indicted. One has been arrested in the past. In 1872, President Ulysses S. Grant was arrested by a Black police officer for speeding on his horse and buggy. So there's precedent for a president being arrested, but nothing like this. This is shaking the very reality of young people throughout the country. On Friday, March 17th, President Trump, former President Trump, announced that he believed that he was going to be arrested by the New York District Attorney, Alvin Bragg. In his announcement, he called for his supporters to take to the streets. It's as if it was January 6th all over again, potentially inciting violence. Simply put, 2023 is not an off year in American politics and in the fight to save our democracy. Between President Trump's indictment and the many crises that are facing our country, the recurrent killing of young, unarmed Black men and women, the threats to the LGBT community, the threats to academic freedom, these are the issues that draw young people in to become civically engaged and to register and to vote. When we are organizing young people, you need a much longer runway to build up their knowledge set and their skill set. It's not just like you can parachute in September of the presidential election year and expect young people to vote. That is not how it happens. The fact that young people have been making the difference that is saving our democracy means that we have all had to shift our gears in how we work, how we get them engaged in the issues and thinking about the issues, and how voting matters in helping resolve some of these crises. We welcome you to this conversation. You will get to see how these rapid response town halls and the rapid response engagements that we're doing with our young civic influencers on campuses, whether it's community colleges, trade schools, technical and vocational schools, four-year colleges and universities, how it works, how we begin to build that momentum so that by November of 2024, they are primed to vote on the issues that matter to them and help save our democracy. Now, why this moment? I am so thrilled to welcome our board member to this conversation, the esteemed, the very esteemed Supreme Court advocate who's arguing before the US Supreme Court, Bruce Spiva. Bruce, thank you for coming to join this conversation. How important is it, Bruce, in this moment for young people to be concerned and engaged in the conversation about the potential indictment of a former US president?
Well, thank you first of all, Maxim, for your kind words. I really appreciate it. It's critical because there really are four potential indictments of the former president. The one that we've heard so much about in the news last week in New York, but also in Georgia in Fulton County for the former president's alleged interference. And really, I put alleged in quotes because we all heard the phone call where he asked the Secretary of State to find some votes for him. And there are two potential indictments at the federal level for the January 6th insurrection itself, for fomenting that, and as well for the classified records and the attempts to hide those. So there, the country's really still at a critical time and a dangerous time, and so it's very important, I think, for young people to be engaged and to participate.
How do you see some of the questions that are coming up, some of the threats, some of the dangers that are coming up with this potential indictment. I mean the entire performance of this moment. For example, we have, as you said, a district attorney in Georgia, Fulton County. You have the Manhattan district attorney with a case, not criminal, but the New York Attorney General with a case, and two potential federal cases. But we also have the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Washington demanding the appearance of the Manhattan Attorney General to come and testify about a New York State investigation. What does this mean? How do you interpret that as a lawyer and as an American citizen?
Well, it's a continuum of these unprecedented. They're now precedented by the former president himself and his enablers and allies. Various types of attacks on the democratic process. I mean, the latest attempt by Speaker McCarthy to call as you said, a state official, an elected state prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, before the U.S. Congress. It's an attack on federalism. The federal government has no business telling a state authority how to enforce New York state law. That's why we are 50 states joined as a union, not a union. And it's also, of course, an attack on separation of powers in the sense that you have a legislative body, even if it were at the federal level, trying to haul before the Congress a member of the executive who's doing his duty to investigate and potentially indict and bring before the third branch, the judiciary, these alleged crimes. So it's really an attack on democracy, an attack on the way our system's supposed to work, and it's of a piece with what we've seen all over the place. I mean, in Georgia, the Fulton County prosecutor Fani Willis is fighting attempts by the Georgia state legislature to potentially remove her and other prosecutors. By the way, most of them newly elected African-American prosecutors, elected in either majority or large percentage African-American or of color jurisdictions. But it's no coincidence that it's coming at a time where she may be reaching a decision on an indictment on the former president. We've seen in Florida, DeSantis actually removing a prosecutor, a locally elected prosecutor, for the way he was or was not enforcing the Florida abortion restrictions. So this is kind of part of, and there are many other things that we could talk about, these attacks on our democracy. And so I think it's very disturbing.
Right. So here is what I have heard in conversations with some of our young folks that we are organizing on campuses throughout the country. How is it that the speaker gets involved in trying to disrupt an investigation into a person, former president, super powerful, but who claims to be one of the wealthiest people on the face of the earth? And they don't see that kind of energy or engagement when it's about the disenfranchised, the most vulnerable, folks who are being shot, unarmed young Black men being shot or smothered to death. When it deals with vulnerable women who are seeking reproductive rights and so forth. But they're seeing it in this kind of scenario. And they're seeing, as you said, with newly elected, the first Black Manhattan DA, same thing with Fulton County. You can understand the level of confusion, but also trying to understand what they can do in a country that seems perhaps going in the wrong direction in terms of preserving our equality, fairness before the law, and being able to feel safe that people have their interests as an equal, not as some kind of subject.
Yes, well, I think it only underscores the importance of mobilizing and being active at all levels of the elections because it's political, right? I mean, why we used to have some constraints on what an ordinary speaker, or a typical speaker, or a typical president would do in terms of interfering with a co-equal branch, or even a state government function, which they really have no business in interfering with in that way. But those norms have been blown. And what's the difference? Why this year do we have the type of thing like the attempt to call Bragg in? It's of course the turnover of the House from one party to the other, and the other party is very supportive, afraid of the former president, and so they're doing his bidding. But you also see it at the state level, because in Georgia, as I said, they're trying to pave the way, at least, to potentially remove Fani Willis and others. They're also doing it with election officials, trying to replace nonpartisan election officials, potentially with partisan officials, with the legislature, or people who are appointed by the legislature. And so it's very important. We often forget about the state elections, the elections for state House of Representatives and state Senate and governor, and Secretary of State and Attorney General. But those are critically important, sometimes even more important than the federal elections, because they can wreak so much havoc on the very machinery of elections, whereas we could rely to a large extent on norms. That is no more. Those times are gone. And so the only way to protect our democracy is to participate in it.
I want to underscore the norms are gone. The norms are gone. When we hear today, oh, but this is unprecedented, and do we really want to go down the path of indicting a former president? As you mentioned, there are lots of firsts that this former president has done. We never had a former president call for an insurrection and attempted coup, violence in the streets, white supremacists to stand back and stand by. And so when you've had this happen, the beauty of American democracy is to be nimble and therefore to respond. We're no longer in a period of the old norms. And I think that young people get that. And I think we're seeing a generational shift in so many different ways of how ardent they are for a response that they can help shape our democracy. And an old guard, perhaps, I'd like you to comment on this, in the way, say, Mueller, who led the impeachment investigation, handled the affairs, and how our Attorney General, former judge of the First Circuit in the federal system, is handling this. It's not the way I think that a lot of people who are in this moment feel is appropriate in terms of speed and nimbleness. What is your opinion?
Yes, well, I think there's an unequalness, and part of it is born, I think, of principle of one side. But I think if I could draw an analogy, it's they are bringing a knife to a fight where the opponent is bringing guns, literally, unfortunately, and of course I condemn violence of any sort. So it's just an analogy, but what I mean by that is that the Attorney General has taken way too long to investigate and come to a decision about whether to bring an indictment against the former president for the January 6th insurrection and the classified documents. And that, of course, is lending fire to the other side that says, oh, well, now this is political because he's already announced. Of course, he announced his intention to run for re-election precisely to try to gum up the works. Mueller, former Director Mueller, similarly declined to even give his opinion on whether the former president had obstructed justice because of an outdated memo at the Justice Department that said that a sitting president at that time could not be indicted. I think that memo is incorrect and should be rescinded, because if someone can't be indicted, that means they're above the law. And in this country, it's supposed to be the case that everybody is no one is above the law. But he took that a step further and said, well, I won't even give my opinion as to whether he violated the law. And of course, that leaves only a political process, the impeachment process, to have any kind of reckoning because of the former president's behavior.
Right. So let me bring in someone to this conversation. Our amazing statewide organizer at large, but she focuses on North Carolina, Anna Covage. Anna, you've heard Bruce talk about the importance, the change in the entire zeitgeist of our country with what's been happening, particularly since 2016, with the election of then President Trump. How important is it that young people are engaged and respond in this moment for our work in getting a growing young voter movement?
Yes, thank you, Maxim, and thank you, Bruce. Happy to join y'all today. Moments like the indictment of Trump serve as a catalyst for our organization to be able to tap into the energy and the passion that young people and civic leaders already have. And they now, with our program, are able to have the space and the support to be able to process events such as this, and then continue to actively work towards positive change.
So do you anticipate that this moment will have the same kind of energy that galvanized young people, like the Black Lives Matter movement, the leaking of the Dobbs decision? Will it have that impact? And if it does, will that lead to greater participation by young people in registering to vote and voting, and also long-term continuity in voting?
Yes, I think that young people are continuing to demand accountability from elected officials. Bruce, you talked earlier a lot about emphasis on state elections. And I know, for example, our North Carolina civic influencers are demanding accountability from our state General Assembly, as well as our North Carolina Supreme Court, as they pass and introduce harmful legislation and rehear cases that will threaten voting rights here in North Carolina and free and fair elections. Young people like Jaheim, who is a North Carolina civic influencer and is here today, so hey, Jaheim, are working hard to have their voices heard, demand accountability by attending rallies like the student debt cancellation rally before the U.S. Supreme Court last in February. So I almost wanted to say last month, and I realized we still are in March, so it was last month. And another civic influencer, Ayana, also attended a rally in Raleigh, North Carolina last week, where she demanded and spoke before a crowd of people and had her voice heard, demanding that we protect voting rights here in North Carolina. Young people are using these opportunities to attend rallies such as these. They're also setting up tabling events on their campuses. They are getting that face-to-face time with their peers. They are creating social media posts with videos and photos. They are creating podcasts where they are sharing the things that they are learning and creating space to have conversations around civic engagement. And they're collaborating with coalitions to learn together and to create programming. So they didn't stop when the midterms stopped. Our work didn't stop when the midterms ended, and it won't wait until the 2024 presidential elections. They're continuing to advocate, organize, and learn with one another.
And you, more than most people, can speak with real authority. So Anna, could you share with our guests your background as a high school teacher in North Carolina and the other accomplishments that you bring to this work?
Yes. So before coming into this role, I taught middle school and high school social studies for 9 years here in Southeastern North Carolina. My parents were both North Carolina public school teachers. So I have always known the power of young people as change makers, and this work reaffirms that. And I continue every day to be just in awe of all the wonderful things that our civic influencers are doing across the country, but of course, particularly the amazing young people in North Carolina and South Carolina that I get the honor to work with.
Great. And so here's a question for both you and Bruce, who I know has also represented, for example, folks involved in Black Lives Matter protests. Are young people apathetic about the issues that are affecting America right now? Anna, you first.
Absolutely not. And not only are they not apathetic, they are both aware and they are invested in what's happening at the local, state, national level because they are impacted by it. Their daily lives are impacted by it. And they, again, as I mentioned earlier, just are looking for space and support and community and opportunities to build on the skill sets that they already have and learn new ones to continue to be involved.
And Bruce, same question. Are young people apathetic? And let me add a second part to that. Is this an off year for us involved in democracy work? Is this an off year for our engagement with young people and young voters?
Well, to the first question, I agree totally with Anna that they are not apathetic. I mean, my two young sons, 19 and 20, I certainly know it from that. I know it also from the time that I went down to the Black Lives Matter protests in the wake of the George Floyd murder. And I was certainly, one of the oldest people in the crowd. And it really galvanized a historic movement, the likes of which I think we've really never seen exactly in this country. I think this is not an off year. I think Anna's example of the North Carolina Supreme Court is excellent because here we had a state legislature in North Carolina which had drawn very unfair maps that would have given a very large advantage in a 50-50 state, would have given the Republican Party something like a 10-4 advantage in terms of congressional representatives. The court struck it down. The last court struck it down. We had an election just this past year. The court flipped in terms of its partisan makeup. They agreed to rehear it. Most observers think it's likely that they're probably going to reverse that. And so every year there are elections like that. And even where there are not, it's the beginning of the next election. So it's the 2024 cycle is well underway for Congress, for state legislatures, for Supreme Court, state Supreme Courts, which have become so important. Wisconsin has a state Supreme Court election coming up, which will be critical. And so we have to pay attention every year, and we have to participate every year, because when we don't, in my view, the forces of darkness that want to take us back, that want to overrule a woman's right to choose, that want to prevent Black and brown and young people, young voters from voting, they take over. If we go to sleep, that's when they win.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Anna. So, folks, we are going to be doing a whole series of rapid response town halls that will help draw young people in early to the fights that concern them: a woman's rights, LGBTQ equality, fairness, for racial justice, academic freedom, any number of things, and help them from today and onward build momentum on their causes and issues and connect that to registering to vote and to vote. This starts now. We don't parachute in September of an election year, of a federal election. There are state elections, as Anna's mentioned and Bruce has mentioned. There's advocacy on major laws. There are lawsuits like we're engaged in Ohio, which is really trying to remove any possibility of lots of young people, particularly young people of color and low-income young people, from being able to vote. If the only way you can vote is with a passport, an Ohio driver's license, a military ID, or a government ID. Ridiculous, sinister stuff, in my opinion. We need your help, and we need your help now, because relational organizing with young people starts today. It is not transactional, it is long-term. With that, before we take questions, I'd like to bring back Elise.
You've heard how this week's expected indictment will impact youth voting in this year's state and local elections and the 2024 presidential election. We need your financial support this week to support young people who are organizing right now around this indictment. And during the month of March, our very generous board chair is matching all donations, so your timely dollars will go even further. Please consider funding some of our 1,000 civic influencers, our boots on campuses, for $2,500. You can also adopt a trade school or community college for $10,000. We have the ability to run peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns, so you can recruit your friends and family to help you raise that goal. Another option is to adopt a historically Black college or university or Hispanic serving institution by giving or raising $15,000. Or give or raise $25,000 to support young people organizing around the issues that matter to them, like defending our democracy and fighting the anti-LGBTQ+ legislation being passed in states like North Carolina, where Anna is based. Additionally, we welcome your introductions to potential partners, supporters, or foundations. You can send all those introductions to me at elise@civicinfluencers.org. And all of this information will be available in the materials that we send to you after today's town hall.
Thank you. Thanks, Elise. So I have a question here. How do we avoid being political? We do not avoid being political. We are very political. The Constitution is a political document that established our country. What we aren't, we're not partisan. When we're talking about the January 6th insurrection, that was probably the ultimate action of voter suppression, to destroy and throw out Georgia's votes and Wisconsin's votes and other people's votes. That is not for us partisan. That is about protecting our democracy and our right to vote. So we think we are helping young people discover their political agency and helping them identify the issues that they care about and how to navigate those issues and help through a democratic process, work through what they might want to do and how they might want to do it, whether it's advocacy, whether it's voting, whether it's educating others and their peers and so forth. We don't avoid the politics. That's important to being an American, have political agency. What we do this is in a nonpartisan way. We're not endorsing any particular party or any particular candidate. Are there any other, so I see Elizabeth, Maria Renee or Elise, are there any other things that I should address right now?
Yes, we have a question from Lena Rose Avila. And the question is, what work is being done regarding the Wisconsin Supreme Court?
Right. So thank you for that question. As Anna mentioned, it is so important in this year to be focusing on elections that are not federal, even though we did in fact get involved in the special election in Virginia, Congressional District 4, which was won for the first time by an African-American woman, by an African-American period. So we are helping young people understand the parallels. Allow this sort of wonky talk for a second. So there's a trifecta in our federal system. You know, there's the Supreme Court, there's the Congress, and then there's the presidency. And in states, they're similar. There's a governor, there's a court, and then there's the state house. Each element is really important. And as we've seen and heard from Bruce talking about the gerrymandered maps of North Carolina, there's serious voter suppression affecting young people in Wisconsin. How the court rules matters significantly to our rights, whether it's our right to have an abortion, whether it's our right to vote, whether it's our right to have equal treatment under law if you're Black or brown with white people. And so we are actively educating young people about the process of each branch of government, whether it's statewide or federal, and then how they can get involved in advocacy and in voting for those elected officials. And we're doing that not just in Wisconsin, we're doing that in Florida. We're doing that in Texas. We're doing that in Michigan, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, etc. Each of these races are crucial. Each of these is crucial for what is going to be the biggest election of our lifetime again, which is the 2024 presidential election. And remember, Wisconsin is a swing state, as is Nevada, as is Georgia, as Arizona. And these are states that are won by less than 10,000 votes or under 20,000 votes. So every vote matters, every young vote matters, and that's the work that we're doing. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you all. I see that we're just a little over time, but I really appreciate you being with us today. Be with us for the long haul. We have to be with young people for the long haul. American democracy is neither a sprint nor a marathon. It is a relay. And that relay doesn't have an off year for youth involvement in the issues that matter to sustaining our democracy and the health of our country. And I thank you for being with us and investing in us. Thank you so much, Bruce. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Elise, and thanks everyone. And thank you so much, Liz, for your generous offer to match every single gift. It's unlimited this month of March. Early money is so important to get young people engaged early and sustain them over the next 2 years through the presidential election of 2024. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.